Hi guys, welcome back to Brew Talk with Mr.Beer, episode 94 and part 2 of our third installment of our advanced education series. Today we're getting back on track with hops. Last week we talked about what hops are, what they contain, and today we will discuss how we use them the way we do to achieve a specific finished product. I think a good place to start is by addressing one of the most common hop questions I get. When do I know when to use my hops? Well, the answer is dependent on the beer that you are brewing and the goals and what your goals for flavor actually look like. As well, of course, what ingredients you are planning to use. Once you know the general style and desired bitterness of your beer, you can begin considering whether you would be needing a high alpha acid hop or a low alpha acid hop. In most cases, that decision is relatively easy. If you are trying to brew a very bitter hoppy style, it is usually the most efficient choice to select a higher alpha acid hop option. Alternatively, if you are planning on brewing something less bitter, it makes sense to select a hop with lower amounts of available alpha acids. As we briefly touched on earlier, one of the most common purposes for using hops is actually for bittering. We also discussed that alpha acids have been exposed to heat or isomerized. Are the chemical components directly responsible for this bittering potential? The perceived bitterness of a finished beer created by the alpha acids from the hops is referred to as IBU, or International Bitterness Units. While all hops contain alpha acids, some contain more than others, but as brewers we have the ability to manipulate the bitterness of hops in our boil through 3 basic boil control parameters. They include temperature of boil, length of boil, and gravity of boil. Let's talk about the first, which is temperature. Now you cannot force a hop to exceed its bitterness beyond its inherent natural alpha acid content. But temperature plays a major part in the chemical changes that convert humulone to isohumulone, which is the bitter version of itself. It is important to know that hops begin to isomerize at or above temperatures of 175 degrees Fahrenheit. At this temperature, your wort is generally not yet visually boiling, of course there are exceptions, and it is here that your hops offer the most gradual rate of isomerization. And longer, lower boils do tend to produce a smoother bittering character compared to beers made with hops exposed to very high heat boils. The option a brewer chooses to take depends again on what he or she is attempting to achieve. A snappy and sharp West Coast IPA might do better to have a higher heat addition, while something with a smooth but apparent bitterness might need a lower, slower temperature boil. Next we come to duration of boil. As we mentioned earlier, a longer boil can potentially extract more iso-alpha acids and even help to maintain a smoother type of bitterness depending on the temperature. Boil duration and its effect on isomerization is the exact reason in brewing that we employ hop schedules. A hop schedule, in case you were not already aware, refers to when in the boil process and for how long each hop addition is needed or added. For example, for a very bitter beer, a brewer may opt to add an addition of hops very early on in the boil and allow that addition to remain in the boil for, say, 60 minutes. In the same boil, that brewer may decide to make another addition of hops later on in the boil process. A hop schedule always counts down, so if your total boil time is set, for example, 60 minutes, but you are slated for hop additions at 60, 30, and 10, you would add your first addition at the top of 60 minutes, and then the next addition when there's 30 minutes left of the boil, and then the last addition on your schedule at 10 minutes remaining of the boil. Hop schedules help to build a more dynamic range of bitterness and flavors, either from one single hop or a multitude of different hops. You may also choose to add multiple close additions over a longer period of time to pull large amounts of smoother bitterness from your hops. A good commercial example of this method being used is Dogfish Head's 120-minute IPA. Hopefully now you're starting to see how boil duration and temperature work hand in hand. Next, we move on to the third parameter, boil gravity. You probably already know that original gravity, or OG, as we use it in brewing, refers to the relative density of the wort before it is fermented to produce your beer, being chiefly dependent on the quantity of fermentable sugars in the solution. It is regarded as a guide to the potential alcoholic strength of a finished beer. To put it simply, gravity refers to the existing or remaining amount of sugar or carbohydrates left in your wort or beer. So what does that have to do with boiling hops, you might be asking? The amount of sugar, or the gravity in your wort, while boiling has a direct impact on the expression of the isoalpha acids from your hops. This means that your boil gravity can help to control the bitterness of your finished brew. The rule of thumb with boil gravity is basically this. The less sugar you have in your wort while boiling your hops, the more bitter your wort will ultimately have the potential to become, given that the time and temperature parameters are also set up with this goal in mind. You have probably already figured out that the opposite is also true. A wort boil that contains a high gravity or more wort sugars will be more flavor forward and less potentially bitter. Higher gravity wort boils are often considered less efficient, as they tend to require larger quantities of hops in order to achieve more intense bitterness goals. For many homebrewers and even professional brewers alike, a large part of the thought they give regarding recipe formulation is to the delicate control of the synergistic relationship between these three primary boil parameters. The reason for this is because they directly help you to modulate your beer's bitterness. Now, it is important to mention that the hopping methods I am discussing today are not the only times or ways that hops can be added. There are several options depending on how you brew and what kind of system you're actually brewing on. But for the purposes of our application to primarily extract and partial mash brewing, we are focusing on the two primary most well-known techniques, which is bittering or boil hop additions, like the ones we discussed earlier, and dry hop or aroma additions. We will discuss dry hopping additions next. So what is a dry hop addition? Dry hopping is a relatively broadly and loosely used term that covers several types of hop additions during the fermentation process or immediately after the boil, rather than when the wort is being actively exposed to heat in the active boil or in other pre-boil hop infusion processes. The primary purpose of dry hopping is to impart the flavors and aromas of a particular hop without drawing out the bitterness from the process of isomerization through boiling. In most cases, you will see dry hopping conducted toward the end of a beer's fermentation process, or after the krausen on the beer starts to settle. There are two main reasons for this. The first reason has to do with maintaining the freshest hop character possible from the fermenter all the way up to the imbiber, as the most delicious hop compounds also tend to be the most volatile, as we discussed earlier, and are easily lost to the atmosphere through the release of CO2 or also with age. The second very big reason is a process called biotransformation. This, put simply, means that during the most active part of fermentation, also known as krausen or exponential growth, the yeast is typically producing larger amounts of a very manipulative little enzyme called beta-glucanase or B-glucanase. Now, not all yeasts make enough of this particular enzyme early enough in fermentation to catalyze a noticeable biotransformation of hops, but the ones that do can end up changing the flavors of your hops drastically in some cases. Some brewers opt to capitalize on this intentionally and are keenly aware of the result that will yield. When truly understood, it can be used as a tool to achieve specific flavor goals. Honestly, biotransformation in beer probably could be a topic all on its own, but we should probably not go too far down that rabbit hole today. So in summation, dry hopping happens late in fermentation, but not exclusively, and provides the highest levels of aromatic and essential oil contribution. So hopefully, you are now feeling a little bit more empowered in your understanding of hops, what they are, how you use them, and what their contributions are in the brewing process. If you are struggling to understand what your hop contributions might look like in a custom designed recipe, I urge you to employ one of the many free brewing calculators available online. Sometimes it can be a bit of a learning curve to figure out how to enter certain extracts or certain really specific ingredients, but that's what we're here for. If you ever want to get into that, you can always give our help desk a call and we can kind of let you know the tips and tricks that we use to get around some of those brewing calculators and get a good idea of what kind of effect your hops are going to be adding to your finished product. All right, brewers, that just about wraps up our discussion on hops. I could probably make several episodes about this one particular subject. This is just so vast. So if you have any more questions about hops or would like to learn more about something else specific, please let me know in the comments. If you missed the first installment of last week's episode, check the link in the description so you can catch the knowledge in that and kind of get the foundation of where we started. Have a great day, everyone, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you more educational content like this. Make sure you join us back here next week for more Brew Talk with Mr. Beer and with our friend Robert. Cheers, guys, and have a great day.